today I have an amazing person. She is so amazing. Katie is exceptional. She is here to talk to us about just, secondary. Many times we don't even talk about secondary settings, but today she's here to talk about, like, are you interested in implementing reading workshop, yay, in a secondary setting? So I am excited. But before we dive into that, tell us a little bit about how extraordinary you are, Katie.
Why, thank you for that introduction. I am extraordinary. No, I am currently a 7th grade teacher, an English teacher, and I came to middle school by way of elementary school. So I taught elementary school, was a reading specialist in elementary school, and decided that I wanted to go back in the classroom, but I was not interested in teaching math. So I decided to go in middle school. And with that came a whole host of other new learning and new understanding. And I love where I'm at. Hoping to get my PhD soon too. So really working.
Wow, that is amazing. Goodness. That is a lot.
Yeah, it is. But you love what you love.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a really interesting concept because we typically don't think of, the term workshop in secondary. And I don't know if it's very popular in secondary.
So I think it's making its way there. It's also known as the engagement model because people didn't want to hear the word workshop in secondary, but as an elementary person, I am totally fine using the word workshop, and that's what it is, right? It's taking the workshop structure and implementing it into a secondary setting. And I know math workshop is also like slowly making its way into the secondary setting. So it's just the idea of giving the choice to the kids and not always telling them what they have to do and how they have to do it. So,
you are so right. And that brings up so many points. So let's go ahead and dive in and let's talk about what does this even look like? So tell me about scheduling.
So it's different depending on where you are, right? So for some of us, we have 45-minute periods every day. Some of us have block periods and have our kids every other day. And so what I've done is I've kind of broken that down. I have a blog where I break it down, but really what I say to do if you're seeing your kids every day is to think of it over 2 days, because a workshop really needs to be, 75, 90 minutes to really get into it. So, and then once you have your time period, my first piece of advice is to take half of that and save it for independent work time. So where kids are choosing what they're reading or choosing what they're writing. And then you look at the rest of it and you think, okay, you usually have to have a warm up, right? Because we're in secondary, we have to take attendance. We have to do all the things. Kids come in late, whatever. They get lost. I don't know. And then you have your focus lesson, which is where your whole class comes together and you can do, we're going to talk about this later, but all the different things that you need to do with them. But the majority of the time is work time. If you went into a studio, into an artist studio, you would see the kids working at their own pace on their own things while the teacher goes around and guides them in the direction they need to go. And then you all come back together at the end. And again, just like in a studio, maybe the teacher's like, hey, look at this one painting and how the artist did this, right? Look at this one piece of woodworking they did today and this technique that they used. And then there's time for kids to reflect on what they've done and what they need to do next to move themselves along as readers and writers. So, I mean, my main piece of advice is just to take half of that time and hold it sacred, where your kids get to choose what they're doing and you guide them.
So that brings, oh my God, that brings a lot of questions for me. I just imagine, because when I taught first grade, it was so many activities. So I don't know if you're going to go into that, but hopefully I can just learn a little bit of some of the choices or must-dos or may-dos that they get to choose or select, and how would you organize that?
So here's what I love about workshop. You don't have to organize anything. For me, going from the classroom to virtual was so easy because my kids were so used to, okay, we come in, we do this warm up this day. We have a 20-minute focus lesson. We have 45 minutes where we get to choose. And during that time, Miss Wilburn will meet with us or confer with us. Then we reflect and then we go home. And so going from in class to virtual, the class runs itself because it's scheduled, right? So even in virtual, all I do is I have a timer in the corner of my slides. So like today, for example, was an asynchronous day. They got the same slides they get during class. And I said, hit the timer, right? And then the time wasn't meeting with small groups or conferring, but they were doing the same thing they do every day. So workshop to me runs itself as a structure. I would like to point out, just to be, for everyone who's out there thinking, oh, workshop, like that's not a thing with the science of reading, like workshop's on its way out. We're talking specifically about workshop as a structure. It is not related to any curriculum. So I know that there are people who automatically think workshop and think of Teachers College, think of the Reading and Writing Project, and you can. I'm not here to talk about that. But in this case, in the secondary setting, it's not necessarily linked to units of study with Lucy Calkins. It is a structure to plan your time and to make sure that you can cover what you need to cover while still giving your students the choice to love reading and to love writing because they're able to engage in it.
That it just brings me back to, just that passion and loving what you're doing and, having a purpose. But I do want to ask, just how do you know? So you have your schedule, but how do you know who has accomplished what? Like, how do you organize that?
So many ways. I love workshop because you really get to know your students by name and need in a way that you don't otherwise. So because of workshop, because I meet with my kids at least once every other week, I try to meet with them every week. So I'm seeing them one-on-one and I'm seeing them in small group, right? So I'm seeing them and touching base with them more often. And because every day they set a goal for themselves, and every day they write a reflection for themselves, and every day they're writing a jot thought for me, like I get to know exactly where they're at every day. So, wow. And it gives me more information on a daily basis than it would if I'm just like, hey, do this multiple choice test, like once, we finish a unit or even as a check-in. So it's constant formatives, right? Like I'm getting multiple formatives every day because I'm getting a formative during our focus lesson. I'm getting at least one formative during independent work time in terms of their jot thought. But if I'm meeting them with them in small group, that's another formative. And, it's just, and if I'm conferring with them, that's another formative, right? So on a day, I might have 4 formatives for one kid.
Gosh.
And it took me it's just part of it. It's not like I have to even then take that information and spend hours poring over it because after a conference, I'm just jotting it down. And then the next time I just look at, oh yeah, that's right. We were working on this. Like, how are you doing this? Show me your progress.
Oh my goodness. This is so amazing. And make sure she has a blog. So make sure you follow the blog. We're going to definitely put the link below for that. Okay. So tell me a little bit about, I guess, the independent work time. I think we talked a little bit about it, but if you can elaborate, that would be great.
Sure. So I am a firm believer, and I know there are people who do it other ways, and that's fine. But for me, my students get complete choice over what they're reading or writing during independent work time. So they can choose to read or they can choose to write, whichever is fine. And they can, again, read or write whatever they want. So, a lot of my 7th graders are still reading Diary of a Wimpy Kid. Man, we are digging deep about Greg. We are just jamming. Like, I know I have never read a book, but I can tell you about every single one. But then, but during the conferences, I then try and get them to level up a little bit in their reading, right? So one conference might be about, hey, if you like this book, why don't you choose one of these other 3, like a book in verse, right? I see that as kind of like a stepping stone from graphic novels to traditional novels. Nothing wrong with a graphic novel, but as a reader, you want to build a repertoire, right?
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. They can read or write whatever they want. Now, while they're reading and writing, I usually do 2 to 3 conferences a day, right off the bat, and each conference is only about 5 minutes. So out of a 45-minute time, about a third of it is spent checking in. There's always the kids who aren't going to read or write. So trying to get them on track and see what they're doing. But those are also usually the kids that I'll pull into a small group every day, right? Just so that they need a little more guidance. They need me to tell them kind of what to do and how they're going to do it. And then I might, if I need to, send them off with okay, so now read this part and give me some thoughts about it. if they're not, because you need to scaffold everything. So there are some kids you're going to have to scaffold the choice for. So I try and give a choice in terms of like, you can read articles, newspapers, magazines, like whatever's available to you. That's one way to scaffold it, is to give kids like smaller chunks of text instead of being like, here, read a book, because that's not always as manageable. But during that work time, they're really in charge of their own work, and whatever goal they've set for themselves that day is what they're working towards. Now, how to link it back to what I'm doing in our whole group focus lesson.
Yeah.
I might have, I do. Like, I'll have a list of like, here are some things you might want to focus on. So for example, right now we were working on identity. So how is your character changing? What conflicts is your character facing, and how is that helping shape their identity? How is your character viewed by others versus how they're viewed by themselves, right? And how does that go together? So there will be a list of like things you could think about, as well as strategies you might want to try, right? So maybe you want to look at a secondary character and how that secondary character is being portrayed. Like, what is their identity, not as being the main character? So there's always like a repertoire chart or an anchor chart based on what we're doing, as like, you might want to try this. And then that's what we're focusing on in our small groups based on the formatives that have come out of the focus lessons.
Wow, that is a lot. And I'm just thinking of how amazing it has morphed, right? And you are really, truly differentiating instruction when it comes to every single student. So it's kind of like every student has their own curriculum path that meets the needs of their track. I mean, it's kind of awesome.
That's the ultimate goal. But I don't want people who are just starting, like, I don't want them to feel so overwhelmed by it, right? Because like, let me take you through like a normal class period,
Please.
Right? So I'll do a focus lesson, and we'll get to that on whatever, right? Then at the end of the focus lesson, there's like the I do, we do, you do part. The you do could be a simple sticky note, right? It could be a simple like paragraph in their notebook. So I collect those. I immediately go and like just sort them into like, got it, kind of gets it, needs help, right? So it doesn't take long. It takes me 2 to 3 minutes. That's while they're getting their supplies, going back to their seats, or on virtual. I don't know what they're doing. They're doing whatever they're doing. But so once I have that information, then I know, okay, so this is my small group for today, right? The kids who still need help. I already know who I'm conferring with because I have a conferring schedule. Okay, so day is set. I don't have to do anything else. So then with the conference, I already know my kids because I have I just take notes every time we confer, and I look at their goal sheets. And so I'll take a look at their goals. I'll take a look at their jot thoughts, which I read every day. So like, you generally already know where they're at. So there's not a ton of preparation that goes into these conferences. And then you sit down and you're like, tell me, like, what are you thinking? Right? That's it. And then I already have my small group set because I already know who needs help. So it's not overwhelming in terms of, oh my gosh, there's so much to do, right? And then I might already have an intervention group. Like right now, I have a couple of kids who we literally had to start with like short vowel sounds, right? So that's where we're at. So, you know what your classroom needs, but I don't want it to seem so overwhelming of like, oh my gosh, I have to like be so intimately knowledgeable about all of my kids, because that just comes with the territory of doing it in this fashion and just talking to your kids all the time.
Oh, wow. And I mean, that builds trust. I'm pretty sure they love you and they trust you. The conversations go longer than 5 minutes.
They do sometimes, although like, I got to do the small groups too. So like, let's wrap this up. You can go read Restart. I'm going to go meet with a small group.
So I have a question. Like, what does this look like online? And then is there a collaboration component, I guess, without COVID or pre-COVID?
So for sure, our school is all workshop school. So 6, 7, and 8 all do workshop. And within that, like for our focus lessons and our curriculum, we collaborate. We have common formatives. We have common summative assessments. We talk about kids who aren't making growth and like, what are we seeing? And then those reluctant readers. And then also, how can we extend this for our kids who need it, right? So that we have 2 we have 2 CLTs every week where we're working together as teams. So there's definitely, even now in virtual setting, we still have a curriculum to go through. And then virtual for my kids, like I said, like there's just timers, and like during focus lessons, we do it. Then we go into independent work time. I have a list of who I'm conferring with, a list of small groups, put the timer on. After that, they go into their virtual notebooks and do their jot thoughts, which I go through and comment on. And then they do their reflection on their goal for the day. So
Wow.
it's just it's a routine. Like I literally start the class with like, we have a like schedule. I'm like, same guys, like same thing today we did yesterday, like everything.
Perfect. So I guess that talks about like the flexible focus of the lesson. Can you tell me more about that, or what you're thinking? I know what I compare it to, but I want to hear what you're talking about when it comes to flexible lessons.
So focus lessons are the mini lessons, right? They're like I guess in art, that's just what we call it, the focus lesson. They're the mini lessons if you're from elementary. Yeah. So that's just like the first part of workshop. After you've done your warm up, you all meet together generally, right? On a rug if you're not contagious. Now we just all come together, and actually we've started doing self-paced. So we're all sorts of all over the place with our focus lessons. But that's why I wanted flexible in here, because your mini lesson can be whatever it needs to be, right? If you are a strategy and skill-based school, this is where you're going to teach main idea. It's where you're going to teach text features. It's where you're going to teach inferring, right? It's where you're going to use those skills and strategies and like use mentor texts to teach those skills. We are a concept-based curriculum. So it's where we introduce the identity of identity, the idea of perspective. And like we use our mentor texts to show our thinking through that. If you are a novel-based school, this might be where you use the time to go through excerpts of a novel, to have your discussions, right? It's the time that's whole class time. And that's why I stress it's not a curriculum, it's just a structure. Because whatever it is that you're expected to do or want to do, depending on your flexibility and your freedom, this is the time where you do it as a class. Like so, and sometimes it looks different even in our school where we all have a curriculum that we're following, because my class might need something different than the class next door based on our concept, right? But like we're all heading towards the same goal. So that's still like 20 to 30 minutes where you do the I do, we do, you do, where you're teaching the new skills, you're teaching the new concepts or whatever it is that you need to teach.
Well, I mean, that is a lot. I appreciate you for like even introducing me that, secondary does even do. How cool is that? So, is there anything like you want to share for the new teacher or who's diving into this, or that will help?
I mean, the first step I would take is like just come up with your schedule and like just start doing it. Like don't worry about having perfect focus lessons. Don't worry about having conferences and small groups and goals and reflection. Like every year I've done it, and I've been teaching for a long time. Like I feel like every year I just like add in something new to focus on. Like I'm still terrible at discussions, terrible, right? So like that might be my focus for next year. It's like, how do I add in student-centered discussions? Because we can't all do it all the time, right? So if you're just starting out, like come up, I do a circle, right? Because we do like, oh, like this time is warm up, this time is focus time. That's how we look at it. Like break down your schedule and then just start moving the kids through your routine, right? Like just get used to that and then focus on your mini lesson, your focus lesson, because that's going to hit all of your kids, and about 75% will actually get something out of it. Those other 25% aren't going to, but that's just reality, And then like once you feel like, oh, I've got a handle on this focus lesson and the formatives, then move on to conferences. And your conferences can literally just start out with, hey, what are you reading? Cool, good job. Like just that you're showing interest. So, I mean, it's just building blocks until you can get to where you're like, oh yeah, like I grab these formatives and I sort them and then I meet with these kids, and I do this small group. But it goes really quickly once you kind of get into the groove. And like I said, like I love it was so easy to transfer online because it was a routine. And even this year, starting out, like, because the kids I taught 6th grade last year and 7th grade this year, went right into our routine, and it was pretty seamless.
Sound like they already know. Wow.
Yeah, it's
So
really nice.
you have a blog, so can you tell us where do we tune in, or how do we find get more information on this?
secondaryreadingworkshop.com. Super easy.
Perfect. We'll make sure we put that in the chat, and just so everybody knows about you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I love talking about workshop.
Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks, you too.